Episode 404. File not found. Just kidding. Here's the episode.
This is the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast.
Chapter 16. Unexpected Absences. And our symbol is the Flame of Tarvalon. Before the sun made a rim on the horizon the next morning, Egwene convened the hall of the tower. In Tarvalon, that would have been accompanied by considerable ceremony, and even since leaving Saladar, they had held to some despite the difficulties of travel. Now, Shiriam simply went from sitter's tent to sitter's tent, while it was still dark, to announce that the Amyrlin had called the hall to sit. In fact, they did not sit at all. In the grayness just before true sunrise, 18 women stood in a semicircle on the snow to hear Egwene, all bundled against the cold that misted their breath. Other sisters began appearing behind them to listen, only a few at the start, but when no one told them to leave, the group thickened and spread out to a soft buzz of talk. A very muted buzz. Few sisters would risk bothering a lone sitter, much less the entire hall. The accepted in banded dresses and cloaks, who had appeared behind the Aes Sedai, were quieter, of course, and even quieter the gathering novices who had no chores, though there were a good many more of them. The camp now held half again as many novices as sisters, so many that few possessed a proper white cloak, and most made do with a simple white skirt instead of a novice dress. Some sisters still believed that they should go back to the old ways and let girls seek them out, but most regretted the lost years, when Aes Sedai numbers dwindled. Egwene herself almost shivered when she thought of what the tower could have been. This was one change not even Swan could object to.
Yeah, the lost years. I like the way they talk about that, because the reality is the only reason the White Tower was dwindling is because they weren't recruiting. Mm-hmm. Like, you need to go out and recruit and interview and bring people in. Instead, you've created this White Tower, literally, where you're isolated from everybody and nobody wants to come see you. So guess what's going to happen? You're going to lose your numbers and you're going to get less powerful people. And that's all Black Oddjaw. I have assumed that a lot of the lack of recruitment is, the influence of the Black Oddjaw trying to weaken the White Tower.
Yeah, and there's definitely a certain amount of bureaucratic momentum that has built up, even from people who aren't directly Black Oddjaw. But yes, Sure. It is definitely at its root a deliberate trend rather than an accident or a best practice. Like, this is a conspiracy. This is sabotage.
Mm-hmm. I also love they're all standing, right? We talked a little bit about how the seat that Egwene sits on represents her seat of power, as well as Suwan's, like the stool that you're sitting on. We'll talk about that when we get to them. Mm-hmm. But the fact that here they're standing, there is no Amyrlin Seat. The Amyrlin has no power because she's not sitting.
Mm-hmm. And the sitters aren't sitting. Nothing is real. Yeah. Nothing matters. Everything is in flux. Everything is ambiguous, and it's anyone's game. Yeah.
Yeah, and a lot of real poignant symbolism there for the Aes Sedai and the hall.
Yeah, this is the chapter when her stool is the weakest and most wobbly, and it gets mentioned repeatedly. So, yeah, it very much fits that the sitters are standing here, because that is how not powerful any of them are in this moment.
Yeah. I love that Egwene sits on a chair with a leg that constantly folds, which means her base of support isn't steady. Whereas Suwan sits on a stool with legs of different lengths, which means no matter what she does, it will never be steady, which I think is a great analogy for the way her power worked. Her power base was like on the Black Oddjaw and like it's always wobbly.
Yeah.
The symbolism is great. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we can hit on that again when we get there. But yeah. Anything else you want to talk about in the read-in?
Nope.
All right. So, yeah, we move forward into Egwene watching the assembled crowd and the symbology of, or not the symbology, but the pomp and circumstance of what's going on. Carlinia's nervous, and it's, please don't notice that Carlinia's nervous. There's just a lot of Egwene thinking through all of the subtle machinations going on behind the scenes.
Oh, it's okay. I wanted to ask about this question. Egwene stifled a grimace. Everyone was too concerned with what she herself was about this morning to have noticed, but sooner or later someone was going to and wonder. Is that just Carlinia being nervous? Is that what she's referring to? There's a lot of hers and she's in there, so I'm losing my pronouns.
I believe it's Carlinia and everyone else that she sent out in the same vein as Carlinia. That's what, 3-4 other women? Those are the people that she dispatched the night before.
Carlinia was one of her minions that she dispatched to spread rumors about Loghain and all that.
Right, to remind everyone of all those rumors and get all that stuff going. So Carlinia is looking at her kind of guiltily, like clearly there's a conspiracy, and it's just a matter of like, I hope nobody notices that any of these 4 who are tied to me in some way are looking at me like they have a guilty secret. Like, it's as long as nobody notices that too soon, great, fine. No one will, it doesn't matter. But if someone puts that together too soon, it might undermine this domino effect that she's got set up.
Yeah, I mean, she's attempting to manipulate the Hall into a very specific declaration of war to get power. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of steps between here and there that cannot go wrong.
Yeah.
So I have her basically pushing her stole back and bringing out the 7-striped stole. And that's sort of when she goes from girl to Amyrlin. That whole she comes, she's comes. She's already there, but she's not the Amyrlin until she takes off and reveals the 7-striped stole. That's sort of how I pictured that.
I like that. I just was laughing at Shiriam just subtly undermining Egwene by being ridiculous with her office.
Well.
But no, I like that this is Egwene's last few steps on her way to becoming the Amyrlin. She is very nearly at the seat in that symbolic walk that she's on.
So she announces they're stopping for a couple of days.
And that's a big deal.
That's a big deal. What she doesn't announce is there's also an army of Andorans and Mirandians north of them, which is why they're stopping, and that the 2 days is going to turn into a month. But that's part of her plan.
Yeah, it's everything has to happen in the right order. It's like docking a shuttle to the space station. Every single thing has to go in order for this not to all blow up and kill everyone.
And just a reminder, the goal is pause, confront the nobles, have the nobles doubt your power or what you're doing. Go back to the hall and say, in order for the nobles to believe us, we need to just make a declaration of what our intent is. That declaration should be a declaration of war on Elaida. Because how else are you going to convince people that you just want to bring down one person and not start a whole war? And they all go, yeah, sure, that sounds good. And she goes, oh, so now we're at war. I'm in charge.
Right.
And she has to make all those steps between here and there. And in specific, Takima is someone who needs to be corralled because she knows all the rules.
That's what that was about. We'll talk about it when we get there, but I'm glad you have an answer for that because I had notes that are mostly question marks.
I do have a lot of question marks around that, but I think that's what's going on.
Cool.
And there's a moment later that I think answers the question. You have to go to a different chapter, but it is in there.
Awesome. Okay, so yeah, she is feeling nauseated with how much power and potential is on this moment while doing this incredibly mundane thing of telling everyone that they're going to stop running the army ragged and they're going to actually stop and take a breather for a minute. So it's this very mundane thing, and yet it is making her go, it has begun. Mm-hmm. So it's a very important moment buried in absolutely dry nonsense, which is fun and lovely.
But Romaine has no idea that this is a big deal. No. So as soon as the meeting's over, Romaine stands up and takes their 6 followers with them and is like, we're done. That was such a dumb thing. Like now we have 3 days to rest. It's time to get political because we know circumstances have changed.
Yeah, it's a strong Romaine chapter. Romaine is a real factor in this chapter.
And yet at the same time, totally, like, it doesn't matter who the 3 that follow Romanda and which 3 follow Lelaine. Like, it almost never matters, except because they're always evenly balanced.
Yeah, there's a couple of fun tidbits to drag out of who those 6 are, just because it's easy to forget. It's fun to occasionally remind ourselves. This is a good chapter to remind ourselves who they are, because they all have roles to play. But yeah, it's an Aes Sedai named Salad episode, and we are here for you, dear listener, to navigate it all.
Crunchy and green.
Well, before that, I just wanted to point out a line that really gets to the heart of what the Aes Sedai are trying to do. The sisters hoped for a miracle that they would not have to march on Tar Valon with the world watching. That's the real sticking point with the Aes Sedai, is with the world watching. And that's the miracle that Egwene brings them with traveling, is if we stay in a spot for a month and we train everyone, we can manufacture a miracle. I mean, Andral calls it a miracle when he does Dragonmount's Revenge and pours lava on everyone. He calls it a miracle then, but this is a very equivalent act of moving an entire army in a matter of an hour through a gateway across all that distance. And that is the key to why her plan, like, that's the Deus Ex Machina that she pulls out of her hat, you know? It's the rabbit she pulls out of her hat.
And yet, once you have traveling, it seems like the most obvious decision. Is it like, once you have traveling, at what point do you have your army travel? Right? Like, it's not even a question of if, it's a question of when. Like, it should be the most basic thing about traveling. But at this point, all everyone's been thinking about is how to use it to communicate.
Right. Well, and it's also a matter of strength. You need Aes Sedai of a certain strength to be able to do it. And we spend all of our time with Aes Sedai and channelers who are strong enough. But the knowledge has to get out there, and it has to get to people who are strong enough. So Aes Sedai are slow to innovate, and they're mostly weak. So it makes sense that they haven't gotten there yet, and that Egwene, a very strong, very creative person, is getting there ahead of them by a huge, huge leap tactically. That makes sense.
Sheriam comments about the 3 days, just being like, I'm surprised. Usually, you've really driven us forward and won't let us ever stop, and now you're stopping for 3 days. It's like, that's what I want for some reason.
There's a lot of comments from Sheriam that suggest that she's a dark friend in this chapter. This really lays it out. But yeah, as for the 6...
All right, Brown, show me what you got.
I'm going to take it away. So Magla is a yellow, and she ends up helping run the hospital in Ebudar during the last battle. That's where she goes. So she lives, but because she's doing something actually useful. Soroya and Varlin both are some of the sitters left to manage Tar Valon during the last battle. They're the ones that actually run the tower and the city, while Egwene and all of the other Aes Sedai are out actually doing the battle. Someone has to run the tower. So Soroya, Varlin, and Takima are the 3 who are given that power. And so then so that was the first triad. So the next triad, which includes Takima, also includes Faisal, who is with the Tar Valon army during the last battle and is presumed alive at the end. Her death is not on screen. She's in the room when Gareth Bryn is revealed to have compulsion on his mind. She's part of that scene.
Gotcha.
And then Lyrell is the last one to talk about, and she is one of the only ones of these sitters who remains a sitter after the reunification, and is one of the 4 who corners Cadswain and says, "You're Amyrlin now," at the end. And
I do want to say the remaining a sitter after the reunification is the solution to the puzzle that Suan brings up here.
Right.
That the reason there are young sitters in the Rebel Tower, and actually in the tower itself, is because the head honchos expected that the reunification would happen soon, and they wanted young sitters to step aside when the reunification happened. They didn't want old, experienced people. And so then that leads to a picking of a bunch of much younger sitters because they expected them to not be sitters for very long.
Right. It's like an understudy. Like, you're not going to get to do the main performance, but you might get to do a matinee show just because, I mean, you can pretend to it. It's fine.
And also, Romaine expected they would be easy to manipulate and get on their side.
Right. Their youth and inexperience and awe of older sisters was also supposed to be part of it. But yeah, politically speaking, it was supposed to be, there's no way you're supposed to be a sitter. You will not try to hold on to power when you're told to stand down. And that's a huge part of it. But yeah, Swan is at this point just discovering that there is a pattern. She has yet to figure out why. And she would eventually. I mean, she does. But by then it's too late. Or it's not too late. It's moot. It's moot by then.
They head back. Sheriam holds Egwene up by the shoulder just because it's slippery and icy. And I can see that, like, if you ever moved on ice, having support from somebody else is helpful when one person goes down. And
also, though, like, she thinks she holds her up more than is required because the Amyrlin Seat should not fall on her bottom in the full view of everyone. And just kind of this appearance thing. And I keep thinking about how Sheriam is, but she's holding Egwene up. She's critical to Egwene's facade. And yet she has the power to fuck things up. She knows things. I don't know. It's just, Shiriam just looks so evil in everything she does in this chapter, even when I can't quite say why. There's just this like, I don't trust it. I don't trust it. I don't trust anything about her in this chapter at all.
I think that Shiriam has basically been commanded to get Egwene as much power as possible. Because right now, Halima, Agenor, is still trying to elevate the rebels to attack the tower. So the more power Egwene gets, the better off Halima is. So I think in reality, Shiriam has settled into being Egwene's keeper in reality because that's the best way she can actually fulfill her duties as a dark friend.
Right, I completely agree. And it keeps pointing out in the chapter, like, strangely, she seems to be like this. Oddly, she seems to do that. Like, there's a lot about her that's, like, odd, but then it's this mixed bag because she's supporting Egwene genuinely, surreptitiously. She's actually doing her job effectively. She's happier. Like, it's so confusing because she doesn't look miserable. She isn't doing things that are obviously evil. She seems like she's being a good person. But also, it's all odd and out of character. So it's black flags, you know? It's black flags everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And the reason that Egwene has power over Shiriam and a few of these other sisters is because basically the Saladar Six, right? Because the Saladar Six got together and made this plan that we're going to send 10 Aes Sedai to Tar Valon to be spies. And we're not going to tell the rest of the sisters because they might be dark friends and that would give away the plan. Mm-hmm. Which is as smart and accurate, let's ignoring the fact that Shiriam Saladar 6 is led by Shiriam,
right?
Who's a dark friend. But the plan makes sense. It's just the fact that they did it is leverage that Egwene holds over them. And that's why they're doing her bidding, which is spreading the rumors and all that kind of stuff.
That's why they had to swear fealty, which is almost unheard of even in the secret histories, is because these are unprecedented times and she has Swan giving her blackmail materials, basically.
And that's also like the first step to her taking back power in full, is having these individuals sworn to her, then lets her manipulate the rest of the Aes Sedai in creating a whole power structure.
It's like manufacturing consent, but more purely political and less culturally insidious. And it's funny, Egwene points out that she had actually heard Bayanon's teeth chatter the first time she saw Egwene. Like, Bayanon, the one who's there is Elida's spy, the one who is supposed to be undermining things and now is caught between effectively two oaths, pretty much. She can't leave the camp until she's no longer sworn to Egwene. And that's why she leaves the second Egwene is captured, because that's how she's able to convince herself, well, she's not Amyrlin anymore. And I can go back to the mission I was being stymied from, which is being Elida's spy and, sabotager of plans.
One thing I noticed here, there is this line about warders. Egwene suspected that was a real part of how Sister drew strength from a warder, quite aside from what she could do with the bond.
Yeah.
That implies it is possible for an Aes Sedai to use the bond to draw strength from the warder and not the other way around.
Yeah.
And that's not something I think that's something we've debated about quite a bit, is like how, especially when the show, I don't necessarily want to bring up the show, but like when the show came out, we were like, wait a minute, can an Aes Sedai actually get strength from her warder? And yeah, it seems like that is canon, that there is a physical bleed back of strength and endurance from the warder to the Aes Sedai.
Yeah, it's not something that ever gets brought up or even mentioned again. I think this is the only time it ever gets mentioned. It's certainly not a mechanic in how the world works. But yeah, here is that line that was tickling our minds and making us wonder, is that canon or is that not canon? I think this is literally the only line about it, which explains our confusion.
Yeah.
But yeah, clearly there is some way that strength flows. The warder gets more strength from the bond, and then the Aes Sedai is able to siphon some of that strength if she needs to. And also psych herself up, which is the point of Egwene's comment, is just the sheer competitiveness that inhabits all human beings, because all people are competitive in the same way, because everyone thinks the same. That is the lesson we should be taking away from this.
Yeah.
The next thing is this thing with Morvran and Takema that you promised to have thoughts on, because literally all I have in my book is a giant question mark on this paragraph where Takema and Morvran walk by, with Morvran staying stuck to Takima because she's dogged once she sets a goal. And they just walk by and Egwene thinks about them. And this is a gibberish paragraph for me. What's going on?
Okay. Yeah. Do you want to read the paragraph?
Sure. I will read it. On one of the crossing paths, Morvrin appeared, clutching Takima's arm. Perhaps it was for support, though Morvrin was wide enough to make the shorter woman seem more diminutive than she actually was. Perhaps it was to keep Takima from escaping. Morvrin was dogged once she set a goal. Egwene frowned. Morvrin might well be expected to seek out a sitter for her Aja, the Brown, yet Egwene would have thought Janya or Escaralda more likely. The two of them passed out of sight behind a canvas-topped wagon on runners, Morvrin bending to talk in her companion's ear. There was no way to tell whether Takima was paying any mind. Explain.
Okay, so they're all Browns, right? First of all, right? All 4 of them.
4? We're only seeing Morvrin and Takima.
They're not there, but she's referring to them.
Okay.
Right, they're not physically there, but those 2 are also Brown sitters.
Gotcha. All 4 of these names are Brown. Gotcha.
All 4 of these names are Brown. And so she has sent Morvrin as one of her spies to spread these rumors and basically convince other sitters to basically help her out. And she's thinking, why are you going after Takima? Takima is clearly part of Romaine's entourage. It would make more sense for you to go after and pursue these 2 more neutral, independent Browns. Right? However, Morvrin knows Takima knows all the rules, right? Takima's the one who has a reputation for remembering everything she reads. And so there's a whole period of time during when Egwene is declaring war, when they turn to Takima and say, Takima, is that the law? And she says, yes, and then slams her mouth shut and doesn't say another word.
Right.
And so I think what's going on here is Morvrin is basically saying, listen, something's coming. I need you to shut the hell up about it. Do not open your mouth during these negotiations.
Wow, that's really complex and layered to follow.
Morvrin does not want to reunite. So there's the only other situation I had between Morvrin and Takima is in Crossroads of Twilight. Takima supports negotiations, and Morvrin hears that and is disappointed, which makes me think that Takima supports negotiations. Morvrin was very much asking her not to.
So here she's trying to tell Takima, like, don't. I just don't understand how she's convincing Takima to not say things that are against Takima's interests. It's just, I don't do political plot lines. This is so torturous.
Yeah, see, anybody in the has anything?
Because I never understood the thing with Takima, because she doesn't say anything. And then as they pass the resolution, she jumps up and is like, you're all idiots. Why would you pass this? And I've never understood why she's so tight-lipped and then almost succeeds at derailing the whole thing.
At the war vote, Faisal and Takima defy Lelaine and remain seated, voting no. Something happens that keeps her from standing up because she is in Lelaine's pocket. Something in the conversation stops her from standing. I don't know why. I don't know how.
Something to do with Morvrin's dogged persistence, I guess. Somehow Morvrin talks at her hard enough that she has an opinion that isn't dictated by Lelaine, I guess.
But I don't see anything, I'm looking at Takima. There's nothing that sort of stands out. There's no blackmail.
Just a genuine off-screen hearts and minds kind of thing?
It really does seem to be something Morvrin does seems to affect Takima, and I can't. You're right. There is a missing conversation there. Let me look at Crossroads of Twilight, chapter 16. Yeah, my research doesn't give me anything else. So the clue is that Morvrin is annoyed when Takima is against negotiations. I don't know.
It's just intrigue all the way down.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I don't have a definitive answer like this is what's happening, but like we know from that I think that conversation has to affect Takima's actions in the tower when Egwene is being raised to Amyrlin. Like, I don't think there's any way that she's not affected by that, by someone of her own Ajah. Both are sitters.
Yeah, well, let's, keep an eye out for other times that Takima and Morvran show up, particularly if they show up together, and just return to this question mark of what is going on here. Because neither of them are Black Ajah. This is all like above board light side negotiation and politics.
There's no dark friends, yeah.
Yet. There are dark friends in this chapter, but we haven't found them yet.
Okay, are we ready to keep going?
Yes, we are ready to have our last brief, fluttering glimpse of Selame before she gets killed.
Yep.
Because she dies in this chapter.
I'm assuming Meri's already dead.
Yeah, Meri is in the act of being buried right now, more or less, give or take. And Selame will be dead by end of day. Yep. It's sad.
Yeah, I don't have much for the next paragraph other than just a description of her sort of almost focuses on Selame for a long time before she gets chased out. It's like describes all her duties, like it's just a character building thing. I noticed that the tent is really smoky, so they're dealing with, carbon monoxide poisoning and itchy eyeballs on top of everything else that's going wrong for them. Swan doesn't like staying inside, despite being someone who's had to stay inside professionally, which I like that detail about Swan. That's her whole life, though. She's always wanted to be the one who was out traveling, and Moraine was the one who got to do it, and Swan was stuck inside.
Yeah. And then there's this really interesting moment when Selame has brought her tea, and it tastes of mint. And minty tea is always like, is something about to happen?
Yep.
And nothing happens, but it's like Egwene just drinks it without even thinking about it because, Selame's just a trial, but she tries, and she just absolutely trusts her. And, she could have just been given forkroot tea, and it doesn't even make her suspicious at all.
There's a lot of mint tea. I think he throws in there to just...
I agree. And it scares me every time. Also because I hate mint in general. So, but it's just, Egwene is in a very trusting space in Saladar. She trusts Halima. She trusts Selame. She's very politically, she doesn't trust any of the Aes Sedai, but that's politics. When it comes to her personal safety, she's very, very trusting of the people who share her immediate physical space.
I'm wondering if perhaps that's not part of what Halima's doing to her.
Yeah.
Just trust the people around you.
And then I'm the only person around you, so trust me and me alone. Yeah.
Do we know for sure that Halima is Arengar at this point?
Well, if we don't, we'd find out in this chapter.
Right. Well, what I was thinking is perhaps Chesa might be a red herring that, you don't know. And this is depending on timing, exactly when we found out what. But one of the reasons I always find Chesa very confusing is she doesn't seem to be working for anybody. She doesn't get killed. She's like this totally non-entity. And I was thinking one of the reasons he might have her in there is simply to make you, as a reader, unsure whether Arengar was Halima or Chesa.
Yeah, I could see that because she has the same weird level of comfort with both of them. They both take strange liberties that she allows. Yeah.
The other two servants die. And it would make sense that if Chesa was the one burying the bodies.
Right. Yeah.
So, yeah. So, in the same way that we have had a red herring for Samael with the horse thief. Shel Vannon. And I think that we have a red herring for Arengar with Chesa.
Yeah, I still don't completely trust Chesa, even though I know she's fine. She is a good red herring in that way.
Appointed by a dark friend.
Yeah, any time that she would have done something nefarious, I would have not been surprised. You're just waiting the whole time, and she never does anything because she's actually fine.
And do we ever see Chesa and Halima in the same room at the same time?
Yeah, we do. Keith in chat brings up a good question. Has Egwene been forkrooted? Has she had forkroot? Has she actually experienced forkroot? I think she might not have. I think that was actually an Egwene naive thing exclusively. So actually, there's no reason for Egwene to have that instant recoil at the taste of mint.
Other than being told.
Right. But not that visceral learned experience that Egwene and Nynaeve went through with Mistress Mikura.
So the biggest problem she's dealing with right now is money, right? They have basically no income coming in. and they have to pay out soldiers and everything else. So there's been a couple of proposals. Moria proposed stopping the soldiers' pay. She's a dark friend. That's definitely a dark friend suggestion.
You can tell because her last name starts with Karen. Karen Tanis. Yeah.
Nice.
That's how you can
Karen
remember
Tanis,
that Moria
yep.
is a dark friend, is her last name literally starts with Karen. Sorry to all the Karens out there. You're all wonderful people, except the ones that aren't.
Yeah, your name, whether your name's Karen or not, has nothing to do with whether or not you are a Karen.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
And then Selita, who wants to tax all the towns and villages they pass. That's not a dark friend, but would have similar outcomes because basically you can't take money from you just be a locust eating off.
Yeah.
It's not enough. It's not enough is what it boils down to.
It will end badly and quickly. Yeah. And Melind Nachin is like Selita, not a dark friend, not notable, not having a good idea. It's another quick burst of name salad, and the only thing that matters is that Moria is a dark friend who gets killed in the Purge. When Egwene goes to capture a bunch of dark friends and execute them, Moria is one of the ones who gets caught and executed. She's like a dignified blue that's been a blue forever and ever. I forgot she was a dark friend until I did my notes for this chapter. But yeah, she doesn't do anything particularly notable aside from not get away when Egwene moves in.
Right. And propose some really dumb ideas.
Yeah, stopping the soldiers' pay, as though she wouldn't know what that would mean for the army.
Right.
I mean, in fairness, you keep arguing that the Dark Friends collectively want her to have a strong army so that she can make war. But I mean, chaos, right? Like, as long as there's chaos and slowness, then it works out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they want him to be a threat, but not actually confront the White Tower and win.
You're not an effective threat.
That would...
They just want to sandbag.
They want the White Tower to be split.
Yeah, yeah. Agreed. But the real reason they don't have any money is because they're spending it all on paper, apparently.
I've been there.
Bureaucracies, man. Paper.
Yeah, it's a
We also have our first mention of the stool. And she has to absent-mindedly pull the stool leg back into alignment while she goes through these reports. Watch the stool in this chapter. This is our first mention of the stool, where she absent-mindedly stabilizes it. She's taking it a little for granted. It needs constant maintenance. That's where her power is at.
And that's what the paperwork is just this maintenance of like keeping the stool straight. Mm-hmm. And then you've also got Susan nodded, shifting slightly to try and find better balance. No two of her stool's legs were the same length, which means no matter what Suan is doing, she's always balancing on power. She can never rest. The second she rests, she will fall, which is a great analogy for Suan's power and her Amyrlin Seat.
Yeah. There's also this great line about how her account of the coin remaining looks to have been slashed onto the paper in a fury. Elida literally does that. Swan and Elida are a little bit more alike than they might want to admit.
Yeah.
I mean, and Swan actually does kind of admit it because she talks later about how, like, Elida only built on the cracks that she had created in her time in office. So.
Sure. I think the difference is Suan accepts reality as it is, whereas Elida wants reality to bend to her will.
Right. Well, being Amyrlin is a matter of balancing those two extremes. Like, you do kind of bend the world to your will when you're Amyrlin, but you have to be realistic. Like, it's a tough spot to balance, and neither of them do it very well. But just the writing into the paper with anger is just like, that's an Elida move. I recognize that. Swan.
Yeah. Well, there's no money. That's tough.
It's true. It's true.
We find out that Egwene has veto power over the Hall's proposals, and that's about her only power right now. I don't know if you remember a lot about like the 90s and the line item veto and that being such a big deal about the president.
Not at all. I was not aware of things at that time.
Okay. I just remember that being a big deal. And this always reminds me of like the big argument over the line item veto that the president, which was always the dumbest thing in the world to me. Like, the president shouldn't be able to veto part of a bill. That doesn't make sense. Like, that just, no. But back when pork and there was a lot of like spending that went back to districts, the idea was, oh, this is a good bill, except all these senators have thrown this junk on there. If the president could go in and just cut out the junk, then we could get good bills. Different politics, very different politics today.
Yeah.
But that's what this reminds me of, is like that we've gone back to just a straight veto power from the president. And that's what she has. She's like, if I don't sign it, it doesn't happen. And that's a basic veto.
Well, given when these were written, I could see him writing a little bit of that in.
Keith is clarifying that the line item veto was found unconstitutional, which is, seems obvious to me. Like separation of powers.
We don't need that. What crazy radical thought of that?
Well, same one who thought about separating church and state. And...
Scandalous. Yeah. I would hate to live in a world where church and state weren't one and the same thing. This is sarcasm. I really like this line about Swan. A great deal of history grew up over 3,000 years, much suppressed, hidden from all but a few eyes. Yet Swan seemed to have every detail at her fingertips. I just love that about her. She just spent all her time reading secret histories and apparently has an insane memory, which is just mwah.
There's a little bit of brown in Suan.
Yeah.
Whether she wants to admit it or not, there's some brown in Suan. The fact that she is so into the secret histories is like, yeah, you know who else is into the secret histories? The Brown Aja. Like, that's pretty much it. Like, there's that whole thing where the brown sitter stumbles across the secret histories by accident, and she goes to Egwene for advice on how to get out of being punished. And Egwene's like, maybe you could propose that you could take care of the secret histories. Maybe that would be better if you were, one of the caretakers. Then you wouldn't be punished. And, yeah, and that whole thing. And the fact that I told you didn't discover it accidentally. It's not a leak in information. I'm the one who knows. That. So there's a whole thing about that.
It makes sense because Swan was of all Ajas and none, right? She was partially picked because Amyrlins were dying and blah, 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 politics. But also, she was a good candidate because she has elements of all Ajas in her. And we don't really see that very much, but she's absolutely a fighter in the way that she deals with problems. So there's your green. Mm-hmm. She obviously spent every spare moment memorizing the secret histories, so clearly a brown. That's already two on top of her inherent blueness. So I like that this is her brown showing.
Her love of puzzles makes her very white. Looking like she's got some whiteness to her very much. Yellow. I can't think of anything Suan heals. She's about the least character.
Yeah, she's one of those the assistants for orthopedic surgery. It has to be really strong to move the bones around.
It's better at breaking bones than fixing them. But sometimes that's what healing needs.
Someone's got to do it. That's what healing is. Yeah. Yeah, and then red, doesn't have very much red. And it's not that every Amyrlin has to be super much like Egwene's level of all Ajas and none, but it makes sense that Amyrlins who are picked generally exhibit, but at the same time, most people do, right? Most people are not one of seven things without bleed over into other categories. That's just real. So
I would argue that Suan has some red. She spent her entire career looking for a man who could channel.
That's a really good point.
That's basically her whole purpose.
That is why she's a blue. It's because she's trying to deal with the mannequin channel. So that's a good point.
There's some red associated with her, whether or not she's, not in the I want to cut down men who can channel, but definitely I want to find and deal with and control and corral and protect a man who can channel.
Yeah, that's true. And obviously she's very diplomatic because she did politics well for a long time. So there's your gray.
So she's very close to just everything but the yellow. And that might be why the yellow kind of helped out the reds a little bit in the rebellion.
Wasn't much connection with the Amyrlin for the yellow. Yeah, no. That's fair. All right. Anything left in this POV?
Just that we're heading towards noon. About noonday.
Yeah. I just thought I could read this entire Arengar section because it's awesome. Yep. I was just trying to highlight it. And it's it's just 2 paragraphs. I'll just read it.
Definitely.
And then we'll talk about it because there is good stuff to talk about in it.
Yes. I highlighted the whole thing for you to read.
Nice. A flicker of movement caught Arengar's eye, and she peered through the trees toward the army's camp, an obscuring ring around the tents of the Aes Sedai. A line of wagon sledges was moving slowly east, escorted by men on horseback. The pale sun glinted from armor and the points of lances. She could not help sneering. Spears and horses. A primitive rabble that could move no faster than a man could walk, led by a man who did not know what was happening 100 miles away. Aes Sedai. She could destroy the lot of them, and even dying they would never suspect who was killing them. Of course, she would not survive them very long. That thought made her shiver. The Great Lord gave very few a second chance at life, and she was not about to throw away hers. Waiting until the riders moved out of sight into the forest, she started back toward the camp, thinking idly of tonight's dreams. Behind her, smooth snow would hide what she had buried until the spring thaw, more than long enough. Ahead, some of the men in the camp finally noticed her and straightened from their tasks to watch. In spite of herself, she smiled and smoothed her skirt over her hips. It was difficult now to really remember what life had been like as a man. Had she been such an easily manipulated fool, then? Getting through that swarm with a corpse unseen had been difficult, even for her. But she enjoyed the walk back. All right, go!
I honestly don't think there's anything in there that tells you it's Halima rather than Chesa. I guess other than the men's eyes and the way they look at her.
That part is very, very definite, because Chesa isn't like that at all.
That's fair. That's fair. Obviously, the primitive rabble, all that stuff tells you how, she's forsaken.
Right. She's the researcher who specialized in primitive cultures, that whole thing.
Right. Used to be a man.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Like, we get that right straight out. This is one of the former male forsaken.
Yep.
And the body in the snow, which I think is Selene at this point. I think Meri has been dead for a couple hours.
Oh, you think?
Selene?
I thought it was Meri and that Selame. I assumed this was the first body. I assumed that this was, but I don't know. That was just my assumption. It was just that this was the first one. But I have no idea. No way of knowing that.
Well, Selene, am I saying that right? Selame. I think Mary's been dead. And we also see it when Chesa comes in. She's like, who thought Selame would run off as well? Right,
because we saw Selame in the morning. Mm-hmm. And we saw her in the morning, and then Chesa comments on her being gone in the evening. Well, I guess when... Yeah, Chesa comes in with the midday meal and says that Meri has wandered off.
Meri has wandered off.
And then...
Who'd expect to Selame to go missing too, she muttered, half to herself. Off cuddling with soldiers, I expect. So, she comes in and says Mary's disappeared, goes away, comes back later and says Selame went missing too.
Yeah, and she says that Halima's a bad influence, which makes me think that she saw Halima, like, making friends with them and be like, hey, come away with me, like, come have a drink with me, or whatever it is. So, yeah, I guess there's no way of knowing which body this is. But yeah, no, you make a good case.
That Meri ran away first, and has been gone longer, ran away, in quotes, and then Selene later.
Yeah, I just assumed that we were catching up with the timeline with the first body.
You're right, there's really no way to know. It does seem weird that she's burying one body and not two, is the only thing I'd say. It's like, what happened to the other body?
Well, are we sure that... Oh, she says a corpse unseen.
Yeah.
And I feel like this has to be the first body because she probably tried something different with the second one because that was such a pain in the ass the first time. I don't know. Either way, this is the day that Meri and Selame both get killed by Halima for reasons that are not entirely clear, but may basically boil down to Halima being a Forsaken and having that much care for innocent people. You'd think that she would just make a gateway and shove the body through the gateway, like over the ocean or something. You'd think that would be simpler.
All right, I have a theory. The reason Halima kills these two is they are spies for Romanda and Lelaine. And at this point, Egwene's plan is in jeopardy. And I think the spies figured out what's going on. And they're going to pass word back to Romanda and Lelaine. And to prevent that, Halima kills them because she's supporting Egwene's rise to power here. And is supporting Egwene's attempt at a coup. Because after all, Halima's controlling everything that Egwene is doing right now.
So you think that the Egwene sending out the sworn sisters was something that Selame and Meri noticed and were reporting to Romanda?
Noticed. And we're going to report back. And in order to prevent that report from making it back to Romanda, Halima kills them.
I always wondered what the actual trigger was. But yeah, that makes sense because that's the kind of thing that they as serving maids would notice and report. That's not involving high level espionage. Right. That's just noticing who's going in and out of tents at odd hours. That makes a lot of sense.
And that's what I'm trying to think of, just timing. Why would it happen now? Well, Egwene starting her coup attempt, if you want to call it that, like her attempt to basically take power from the Hall. And if that information had gotten back to either Romaine, then we would have absolutely had a problem, and that would have ruined Halima's plans because she wants Egwene in power, therefore kill the spies.
Right, and Chesa is again safe because she's reporting to Shiriam, who has very different aims than Romaine does.
Or she's not reporting to anybody, because I don't think she's a spy for Shiriam.
No, but Shiriam thinks that she's a spy for Shiriam, and so Halima is going to be under that impression as well. But it's all meaningless because Shiriam's right there, right? The whole Chesa thing is just very... I think you're right. She's there entirely as a red herring for Arengar, just to keep you on your toes for that little bit.
But I love the idea that the servants were killed now to prevent Egwene's coup attempt from getting back to Romaine. I like that in terms of timing.
And it only buys a few hours. But that's enough.
Right. But that's the critical few hours that Egwene needs because she doesn't want them to know. She has to set this up very carefully and very delicately. But
Egwene knew that the two of them were spying. So do you really think that she messed up and they, like, because I feel like she would have known that they were spying and like manipulated that information accordingly.
And it's possible that Halima overreacted and just, let me just close off that loop just in case. Maybe they didn't know anything. It
seems like an overreaction, but that would be in keeping with how Arengar works as a Forsaken. So an overreaction with the side of murder seems about par for the course.
That's pretty typical Forsaken behavior.
Yeah. The other interesting thing is thinking idly of tonight's dreams. I think that reinforces, like, Halima Arengar is just messing with Egwene just for shits and giggles, mainly just to keep her off balance and under her thumb, but she's not doing anything effective. She's just idly torturing her.
That's sort of the key to me, where we get that this one line is really the reason we think that Halima is manipulating the dreams and messing with them.
Yeah.
We get those quotes from Egwene where she's like, she couldn't remember her dreams or anything like that.
Right, but she's running, but that's it. That's all she can remember. And
it would be really interesting to me to go back and is it possible that Egwene's prophecies were implanted by Halima?
No. The ones that she can remember. She knows they're true. Like, she's got that like intuitive dreamer sense that lets her know when things are good or not. So I don't think that Halima is able to insert prophecy dreams. I think Arengar is being very Ravine-like and just playing these like funny little games for amusement's sake rather than actually like making every move count. Grandal would not be wasting time with just idle nightmares. Grandal would be using those dreams to figure out how to implant ideas and stuff like that, but Arengar is not. Agenor has never been that kind of clever. And Halima is not a dreamer. So making nightmares with particular flavors is probably the extent of their skill.
So we jump back to Egwene's POV, unless you have anything else for Halima.
No, just the men are easily led around by boobs and hips. It's a thing.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
I'm sure you don't. Sure you don't. Men are not easily manipulated with curves.
No. Wait, hold on, I have to go cook dinner for my girlfriend. I'll be right back.
No, you must stand to work.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, no, that's all I have left for that section. So then Romaine.
So in comes
Romaine round one. We have 2 rounds of Romaine in this chapter. Here's round 1.
And don't forget that it's funny enough, they have spies on Egwene. Egwene also has spies on them. Faelane and Theodrin are pledged to Egwene, and they are her spies in their camps, and they've been feeding stuff back to her. So they come in, and they're like being told to stay in their place. They're like, oh crap, this is a bad situation for me. I am stuck between a rock and a hard place, which is the sitter I'm spying on and the Amyrlin Seat, both of which would be extremely pissed if they knew what I was doing.
Yeah, it's another name salad scene. It's a lot of subtle stuff. But yeah, Faelane and Theodrin both go stand in the corner. There's like everything with Romanda and Lelaine, everything comes in pairs. Everything is done in mirror image.
Yes.
So that's part of why we call them Romaine, is because you can talk about one and then just swap a few names, and it's the same thing for the other.
Yeah. One thing I did want to point out, again with the stool analogy, Lelaine eyed the stool in front of the writing table and, as usual, visibly rejected such an unsteady seat.
Mm-hmm.
Lelaine has been asked to be Amyrlin several times in the past and has turned it down.
Oh, yeah, I forgot that about her.
She rejected the Amyrlin seat.
Shit, it just goes.
Because it's unsteady.
Yeah.
It's a real deep analogy.
And to take it further, she's not looking to be Amyrlin here. She has rejected the Amyrlin seat before, and she's still looking to reject it here. She wants control of the hall. She wants control of Egwene. She does not want to be Amyrlin. Yeah, God, it goes so deep. The thing I had on this page is, what's up with her having this comment to Swan under her breath that makes Swan blush? What do we have any thoughts about what that's about?
I assume just something about a disgraced Amyrlin. She's, a lot of these people blame Swan for the fall and split of the tower.
Right, but it's like a friendly gesture.
Oh, touching Swan's cheek, Lelaine softly murmured something that sounded sympathetic.
Swan blushed, a startling uncertainty flashing across her face. It's just like I get the idea that like they were friends and they have history, but like, what did she say?
I assume it's like something like, you're doing very well as a, it's like a compliment as you're doing very well to aid the Amyrlin seat. And that's like, she blushes because she's like, you don't get to like congratulate, but at the same time, it feels good to have someone be like, you're doing a good job. So she flushes because it's like a compliment, but not a compliment she's used to getting as like us from a superior, because this woman has not been a superior.
Do you think it's a play nice catty bitch chick thing, or is it like actually sincere? Because I can see Swan blushing either way.
I think it's sincere, if simply because Lelaine doesn't think twice about Swan.
Right.
She doesn't think about her enough to manipulate her.
It's insulting because she actually means it, and it's such a ridiculous, insensitive comment. Yeah.
Right.
That makes sense. Yeah. All right. Cool.
It's like, oh, good job. You got the ball in the round hole. Congratulations. Right. You're so smart.
Right.
And it's like, yeah. Yes, I did that. And yes, I'm smart enough to do that. But I'm also a lot fucking smarter. And the fact that you're like being like, good job, you did that little tiny pedantic task and didn't screw it up. It's like, yeah, no wonder she got angry. Or it could have been, hey, you're doing a really good job in advising Egwene. And she blushed feeling good about that. And then she's uncertain about why she feels good about it.
Either that or it's something way more hilarious. Like, hey, so how you doing with Gareth Bryn? Enjoying washing his socks?
Oh, maybe. But at this point, I don't think she hasn't acknowledged that she's in love. Or was that last chapter where Egwene was like, if you don't...
That was last chapter.
That was last chapter. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, not with Lelaine, but...
Right. So maybe it's something about Gareth Bryn.
I think that you're right that it's condescending, but not meant insultingly. And whether it's about politics or about Bryn, either way, it's that infantilizing... not what Swan is used to accepting kind of situation. Because, there's this whole, just assumption that she is so much less that they fall into. And Jordan's just making sure that we really are seeing that, I guess. All right.
So this whole conversation, this whole time, Egwene's trying to hide the fact that the army of Andorans and Murandians is north and that Gareth Bryn has made contact. Mm-hmm. Right, so Lelaine walks in and is like, we need to talk. And Egwene's like, oh no, she found out. And it's like, no, it's just about the sea folk. Don't worry.
Right, and then she's like, oh boy, it's only about the sea folk. Oh shit, it's about the sea folk. It's hilarious how she has so many different secrets on so many different burners that, her heart is jumping all over her body.
And then when it comes to the sea folk, she sits on her chair and her seat folds out from underneath her. She has no power when it comes to the sea folk.
She manages to catch it at the last minute. She doesn't actually fall flat on her ass until after they leave. But, it's pretty bad.
She has no control over the sea folk.
Yeah, nearly drops her onto the carpets. She hopes she's not blushing. She is so out of her depth. She has no control. This is Egwene and Nynaeve just running wild, or it's Rand running wild. Either way, she has no control over what's happening. She can barely keep her face straight. That is the level of sphere of influence she's got, is keeping her face straight. Yeah,
the connections with the stools are pretty crazy. Really fond of finding this analogy.
Mm-hmm. It's awesome. So Romanda comes waltzing in to clarify which sea folk we are talking about, which is the ones in Cairhien. And it is all about Rand. This is not about the bargain that happened with the Bowl of the Winds, that none of that, which is what Egwene was afraid of. This is about the ones who are seeking Rand out and being enigmatic and mysterious about what their motives are. And Rand is being equally open and forthright about what's going on there. So everyone's frustrated.
And we don't even know really what the deal is. I mean, we know what the deal is between them, but they're there because of prophecy, and he's there because he needs some ships.
And because he knows about their prophecy. Like, that's it.
Right. It's not like that complicated of a relationship. It's like, oh yeah, they have a prophecy that he's going to matter to them, so he's using them for that. And they just don't know. They weren't in the negotiations. However, Egwene does know because she's got people on the inside who are talking to her until I run Riyadh, and she's hiding that from everybody else in the room. But
she also doesn't have an answer to their questions, so it's not like she's only hiding her ignorance, you know?
There is that, yeah. Well, I mean, she could tell them a little. Well,
no, she's mostly hiding her ignorance.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah, you're right. I like this. Pity the girls didn't think to set a regular schedule. It's like, yeah, they did. They just didn't tell you about it.
Oh my God. The amount of overlooking people because they are weak or young from Romaine is just so frustrating. Like, okay, boomer, we get it. You know better than everyone else.
God. Why does this feel very much like boomer politics?
It really does. The hall is very boomer centric. And at this point, Romaine is just completely ignoring Egwene and just bickering with each other. It's just, well, I was going to do that. Well, I was going to do that. Well, let's talk about this. Let's tell her to do that. And it's just name salad and sniping. And Egwene's like, I'm still here. If you ever want to, do anything.
And they're arguing over the use of the Bowl of the Winds and like how it's had disastrous results and why the hell did Marilla do this, which the answer is she didn't. It was Lelaine and Nynaeve because they're more powerful and actually in charge of the embassy.
And how could they let sea folk wilders into the circle? Surely they don't know how to work the weather better than Aes Sedai. It's all that arrogance just making an egg on their face so hard.
Okay. Boomer. Yeah. You're wrong. You're wrong, and your assumptions are wrong, and things are not going the way you want them to.
At all. Just sit down. Be quiet.
Mm-hmm. The world is changing.
Yeah. It's just accusations and threats and then I just skipped all of it until we get to that would cause untold problems whether or not Egwene's own plans bore fruit, and there was nothing she could do to stop it short of revealing what really had happened in Abu Dar, as well as ask them to let her accept the same offer Phelan and Theodrin had. So they're arguing about a bunch of unknowns that she can talk to them about. It's not the sea folk, it's not the sea folk in Kyrian, it's the sea folk in Abu Dar, but yeah. She's just holding her silence because it makes her look smarter and more in control. Meanwhile, they are just saying everything, basically cards on the table with their pettiness. They're doing what Swan and Leanne have been doing, except that they're doing it unironically and not to manipulate anyone. They are genuinely fighting. I always wondered if it was going to turn out that they were just doing a Swan and Lyanna because it's such an obvious ploy and it's so easy to write them off because they are such a mirror reverse image of each other. But no, they really are just that petty in the end, turns out.
Man guy versus guy man running for office.
Yeah.
And it's how Egwene is able to have any power is because the two of them cancel each other out. And what's left is the Amyrlins. She can choose one or the other. And that's what gives her power. And occasionally go her own way, but not very often.
And in this chapter, she's really thinking about she has to go along with this just a little longer, because she's about to flex enough power that she thinks that she's going to have more control than she doesn't for other reasons. But she's very much still in her chrysalis at this point. She has not begun to take any kind of direction and control yet, but she is having senioritis so hard about her ability to do things. And then in comes Chesa.
Yep. And as far as I know, the only reason she comes in here is to let us know that Meri has wandered off.
Yep, which lets us be reminded that that's Romanda's spy. That's it.
And again, Chesa as a red herring for Arengar could have simply killed her and then come back and like, she's run off, we can't find her. AKA, I just killed her.
Yeah. No, I really like this red herring idea. It gives Chesa a reason to be in the plot so much. Lelaine ignores the staff and continues to hammer at Egwene, who says, I will think hard about everything you have to say. not committing to actually tell her what she thinks, because Aes Sedai and politeness are weaponized niceness. Weaponized politeness is a thing that Aes Sedai do very, very good at.
So yeah, they bicker at each other and then leave. And I don't have a lot more from Romaine.
No, just that once they leave, that is when Egwene relaxes and the chair dumps her on her ass on the floor for real. Oh. Letting out a long breath, she settled back in her chair, which promptly pitched her into the carpets in a heap. Like, that is how fragile it is. The second they're out of the tent and she relaxes the tiniest bit, she's just ass over tea kettle on the ground.
And then I love Suan's "some falls hurt less than others," and then leaving. Referring to her falling on her ass versus...
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then she comes back with some food. Swan gets sent out to go get them food, and they go back to their work, and then Shaesa comes in again to tell us that Selame is now missing. And this is where, Halima's a bad influence. And it's like, well, last person you saw her with was Halima. That's suggestive of maybe how she died.
Now she's just a body in the snow.
Won't be found till the spring thaw, at which point the last battle will be basically on. So, won't matter. And then Shiriam appears and asks if Egwene has any further instructions of all things, and then tries to stay, and her eyes are darting uneasily. So, I'm guessing she got some orders?
I'm guessing Halima, after killing the maids, sent her in to find out what was going on. I'm guessing Halima is seeing all the activity, right? She saw the activity, she killed the maids, then she sent in Shiriam to find out anything that she could. That's my guess, is the order of operations.
Okay, because there's the last section of the chapter is this questioning session, and so I assume that was when Halima was checking in rather than in the middle of the day. But yes, something happened. Something happened.
Something happened.
And Halima is the nearest Stark friend and the one with the, Forsaken, and the nearest one to see what's going on and to give updated orders. But yeah, that would make sense. Just figure out what's going on. I saw the maids. I killed them. Go figure out the details. And then Shiriam fails at that and gets punished at the end of the chapter.
We get some reports of soldiers moving out of Kandor, and we know that's because they're starting the quest to find Rand. To
slap some sense into Rand?
It slaps, yeah.
We learn that they have their own little information CIA hub that they're filtering information before they give it to the Hall. It's just everyone's lying to everyone by omission. It's one of the frustrating things about the Aes Sedai in general and in terms of their plot, is that they lie by omission, and that's like 7/8 of their plot.
Mm-hmm. And some of those rumors she can dismiss out of hand because she has, Teleron Riyadh instant information, right? She has information from the Wise Ones. But the Wise Ones also, didn't really tell her the truth about what was going on with when Rand got kidnapped. And also, Rand currently, remember, at the end of the last book, he got stabbed, healed, and then teleported to fight Samael, and is currently running a campaign against the Seanchan, all without the Aiel seeing
Right,
him.
and she's wrong about the stuff she's dismissing out of hand. Tyrion had produced any number of rumors of Aes Sedai allied with Rand, or worse, serving him, yet at least those could be dismissed out of hand. That is demonstrably happening. It's such a big deal that happened, and you've got tons of rumors about it, and you're just ignoring it because it can't be true. It's the preponderance of evidence would suggest that it is. But instead, she's more curious about proof that Rand had killed Matten Stepaneos with his own hands versus a laborer on the docks who claimed she'd seen the former king carried rolled in a rug onto a boat, which definitely happened. Rand didn't kill Matten Stepaneos, but he got reverse Cleopatra'd out of there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And Egwene, the first was far more likely. It's no, Egwene, it's not. The second definitely happened. The first did not.
Yeah, so she's sitting there feeling like she knows what's going on. And in fact, the thing that she believes least is the most true. She is inversely correct about things.
Right. The Seanchan are taking a firm hold in Abu Dar. That's true.
Against very little resistance, yes.
The Shaido seem to be everywhere, although word of them always came from someone who had heard from someone who had heard it from someone. But that's just, the Shaido are everywhere because of what Samael did.
Right, because and Egwene even thinks there can't be that many Shaido unless you scattered 18 bands of them to the four corners Earth in a way that's completely out of character for their own choices.
I also do think you have the White Cloaks, the Prophets people, and just
regular bandits.
Emptying out towns. And so I'm guessing all of that is being blamed on Shido.
Absolutely. Sure. That's easy thing to, bandits, Shido, bandits, Aiel. Yeah. Absolutely.
Oh, this town got emptied out. They took all the goods and killed everybody in it. Who knows? Like, who knows who did that, right? At this point, is it Trollocs?
Right.
Is it Shido? Is it like...
Yeah. And the Aes Sedai are all very convinced that it's all Shido. Like, no matter the denials they receive, no matter the information they have, it's just like, we don't like them, so they're probably the problem.
And that's one of those things where you could probably investigate, and if you knew enough, you could go in and be like, oh, these people were all killed with spears. These people were killed with Trolloc swords. These people were killed with, a mixed bunch of crappy rusty weapons. Like, you can probably figure that out and then do like a scientific survey of all the different but like no one's doing that work.
No, we have much bigger things to do than the forensics of exactly who to blame for all this stuff. So then Swan was staring at nothing so intently she appeared ready to slip off her stool. How does that figure into our stool cosmology?
Oh, that's totally distracted by puzzles that she was unseated from power.
She fell off her seat of power because she was so distracted by her puzzles.
Yep.
They're okay. Perfect. Thank you.
It works every time.
Yep. And it's because she's thinking about this too many sitters who are too young pattern that is she makes into a bigger deal than it really is. She thinks it's a huge conspiracy, and really it's just the heads of the Ajas trying to prepare for the reunification of the tower to have as few hiccups as possible. That's really all that's going on there. But she makes a huge mountain out of this molehill.
And I love that, because we spend so much time, like, in fantasy, you investigate these puzzles, and it turns out to be the puzzle that solves the problem. And it's like, science works like this. There are false leads all the time, or data that leads to a conclusion that, like, oh yeah, that's not that important. Right. It doesn't affect things in the long term. It's a great way to sort of display not just science, but political science.
Yeah, and it's also, to go into a favorite rant. All right, back to the chapter? Back to the chapter, yeah. That can all be at the end. Swan explaining that the young sitters are a problem she needs to sort out, and Egwene being like, Moria being an exception. She's an older sitter, but they must have expected her to be subservient to Lelaine, and that's why they brought her in. Even though she's not young, she was supposed to be easily manipulatable. Yeah. There's this thing where, like, Egwene thinks that Swan is doing this for emotional reasons, and there is a lot of emotion for Swan involved in it. I don't think she's doing it for emotional reasons. I think she's just got a bone and needs to worry it to death, and it happens to not be meaningful. And Egwene sees that it's not meaningful and draws the wrong conclusion. Not that she's like, oh, Suwan's wasting her time, but it's not Suwan's wasting her time. It's just that, like, Suwan happened to come across a puzzle that didn't have any deeper meaning to it. Yeah, and it's funny how much Egwene is, like, looking out for Swan in a sort of, like, patronizing kind of way. Like, would it be a kindness to let her continue? Should I allow her to have this? Right. And it's like, God, Egwene, you learned the lessons of how to be an Aes Sedai a little too well sometimes. But in a way, that is a really good sign, right? For now, she is being the Amyrlin. She's like, do I let these people, like, there's very much a maturity that goes along with making that decision for Suwan. Sure. And I think she's trying to show that sort of evolution into her, as she's gaining actual power, she's also gaining confidence in herself as the Amyrlin Seat. And it's true. She needs to learn these lessons. It's just, she's learning how to be an Aes Sedai with all of the warts and wrinkles, which means patronizing someone like Swan. So they've been waiting this whole day. And finally, Romaine finds out about the meeting between the Andorans and the Mirandians. Can we just call them the Mandorans? Can we just call them the Mandorans from now on? Yes, Romaine and the Mandorans. Yes, that is what's happening now. This is their second visit of the day, and they are much less congenial than they were before. And they come in sequence rather than more or less at the same time. The meeting before, they were together. Now it's serial. That sounds like a band name. Romaine and the Mandorans. Romaine and the Mandorans. Mandoran and the Romaines. Who knows? I mean, we have the Ramones. Yeah. Romaines? Close enough. Yeah, I've got the Mandalorians. It's all just a slurry. Yeah. Name smoothie.
Again, everything happens in pairs. Romanda comes in first, Lelaine second. Romanda says everyone's against her.
They both weave a ward against eavesdropping without permission. That's important.
Yeah. And they both basically say, you will get up there and tell them I speak for you.
Yes. You will. The meeting has to go forward. You shouldn't have done this. The meeting has to go forward. You will give me the bullhorn. They both say that.
Now, you never saw Myst, or you never played the game Myst, right?
I played it a little bit. Yeah.
A little bit. Do you remember...
You want to finish the chapter? So when Lelaine comes in, she says, well, instead of coming to you right away, I went and polled the other sisters and got their opinion. Like, she has a bit of a different approach than Romanda. Romanda just yells. Lelaine is like, I have gossip. And Egwene's like, I care so much. I don't care.
And I like Lelaine's strategy. She gathers some support before jumping in. You know, Romanda tries to get first mover advantage. Lelaine tries to build support and get second mover advantage. It doesn't matter. Neither one of them are going to get, like, Egwene's ignoring both of them is like, hey, I want you two to tell me conflicting things so I can do whatever the hell I want. That's
right.
The point.
And then Lelaine sort of snaps and yells at Egwene that she's not really empowered and it will take 100 years and you're still a child. And it's this tirade. And when you're first reading through it, you wonder, like, is this going to affect Egwene badly? And then it turns out that she's just, giggling on the inside because this is actually what she really wants.
I've got you right where I want you.
Yeah.
Thinking I'm weak, thinking I'm pointless, when I'm going to use the letter of the law to twist it around and force you to do everything I say.
And I completely agree with her that she has to grow now or never when it comes to this. Like, there is something to be said for an apprenticeship, for being someone's shadow, for learning through experience. Now is not the time. Egwene, as Amyrlin, as the world is ending and the tower is split, she needs to grow now or never. Like, the tower needs her to grow now or never. If she can't do this, she needs to get out of the way so that someone else can try. Like, there is no time for learning. And fortunately, she has Swan to give her a super duper level up. Otherwise, Lelaine and Romanda's concerns would be more understandable and justified. Because I don't think Egwene could do this all on her own. She has to have someone like Swan factoring in. She's a brilliant person, but she is still only 18.
Yeah. And then this whole chapter, I think, really leads up to this line, in my opinion. Swan, they couldn't have handed me the hall better if I had told them what to do.
Yeah.
Like, that line, this entire thing, you're like, oh my God, she's getting her ass kicked. They're telling her to do stuff. Nothing's going her way. Oh, this is so frustrating. And then you get to the line, you're like, wait, that's what she wanted? This is going to be good. Yeah, like, that's very much like, oh, everything's going according to plan. I cannot wait to see how this plan turns out.
It's good.
And this is where, if you like the politics, which I do, this is peak Egwene politics. This is like Egwene. I almost prefer this to her rise in the power in the White Tower that Brando Sando writes. Like, this is so good and so clever and so manipulative that it's just, this is Jordan peak political writing. It's just perfect.
I agree. It's so subtle. It's so under the radar. It's hard to parse. I have no question in my mind what's happening in the Sanderson chapters. And I love Sanderson's Egwene. I love her rise to power. There's a lot that I really enjoy that about how he wrote it, but it's not nearly as difficult to parse as this. I had so many questions in this chapter about what's happening and why. These are the chapters I glaze over. Whereas the Sanderson chapters, I know exactly what's happening because he told me in triplicate.
And that's going to be harder to talk about for us because we're going to be like, yeah, so this is what happened and this is why. It's on the page. It's not on the page here.
No, it's really not. It's wonderful, wonderful stuff. And yeah, this is such a pivotal moment for Egwene. She has to be at her subtlest, right? She has the least amount of resources, which means she has to be the most deft.
Right. She has to do the most with the least.
Yeah. So it's all downhill from here, basically. You know?
This is basically the best part of the story, right? Some people like Dumai's Wells. Some people like the last battle.
Chapter 16 of Path of Daggers.
Chapter 16 of Path of Daggers is the best chapter of Wheel of Time. I'm calling it right here. No, it's not. It's not. But it is very good politics.
Yes, it is really, really good political writing and less infuriating than some of the other political arcs. I think that it's just not as annoying.
We're not going to talk about Andor.
Okay, good. I would love it if we just skipped that entire arc.
We don't talk about Uno.
Okay, I don't know that song, and I refuse to know that song, and I am aggressively going to not know what you're talking about, so shush.
I will admit, Encanto, pretty good Disney movie.
I'm not
worth watching
Disney movies. That's not a thing that I do.
Okay.
Anymore. I only obsessively watched 8 as a child, and I don't need any more. Thank you.
Yeah, I just the song that everyone's listening to is "We Don't Talk About Bruno," and I've got we don't talk about Uno.
Yeah, I've seen NPR titles about it. I know it's a thing.
Yeah, it's a thing. And Never Loves. She plays it all the time, so it plays in the house frequently. So, but then like I just have "We Don't Talk About Uno" stuck in my head.
Except that we do, because he's the best. We talk about Uno all the time.
We talk about him quite a bit. Well, I mean, that's kind of the point of the song is they're like, we don't talk about him, and they spend the whole time the song talking
the
about
irony
him.
had not been lost on me, yes. So, what do you want to talk about with this last passage, this last POV, before I read us out? Who is it? Who is her questioner? Shiriam, as I'm going to read us out with this whole POV, but it's Shiriam getting questioned and tortured. Who is the questioner?
Oh, Halima. Absolutely, Halima.
Okay.
Argar,
cool.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
I was pretty sure I just wanted to, I've been surprised by weirder shit, so had to check.
I mean, maybe Delana, but no, I mean, this is definitely... The only thing that confuses me about this is wouldn't Halima, she's there, she knows.
Yeah, that was why I was questioning, is because the whole like stripping her clothes off and stroking her hair, it's all very signature how a Forsaken, particularly Halima, would do this, but the question of tell me what that girl is doing, it's like you already know everything Shiriam knows. You're right there. Mm-hmm. I mean, unless it's like Masana? Question mark?
The only reason I could think of is maybe that Halima was busy killing some maids. And that's why she sent.
It's not Masana's style. The style of the assault is very Halima. It's not like a Shida Haran thing. Mm-hmm. It's not like how, the big warmongering ones would do it. Masana tends to not be nearly as touch-based in her control.
The stroking of the head is very Halima.
Yeah. See, maybe it's just that she was off busy killing maids in an effort to control information. And we've established we think Halima or Argar is very crude and very clumsy and very overreactionary.
And we also hear that Shiriam is extremely happy when Halima leaves because no one's bothering her anymore.
That's true. That's true.
So, I mean, like, I can't see anybody else than Halima at this point.
And so then, with this last line, bitterly wishing that she had never in her life spoken to a single sister in the hall. What do you think that means?
I mean, I think that goes back to how she became a Dark Friend.
Me too.
Because Shiriam's whole goal in becoming a Dark Friend was to climb the political ladder. And so what happened? She became Aes Sedai. She went to the hall to figure out how she could be more powerful. She talked to a sitter. That sitter happened to be a Dark Friend. And that's how she got inducted into the power ladder that is the Dark Friend Black Aja.
That was how I interpreted it as well, is that if she had never started seeking power, she'd never spoken to a sister in the hall, she never would have ended up on the path that led her to this moment. It's not about sitters in the hall for the current conspiracy. It's not Egwene's current politics. This is the mistake she made 15-something years ago.
Agreed. 100%.
Cool. The last light was failing as Shiriam approached her tiny tent, smaller even than Egwene's. If she had not been keeper, she would have had to share. Ducking inside, she had only time to realize she was not alone when she was shielded and flung face down on her cot. Stunned, she tried to cry out, but a corner of one of her blankets wadded itself into her mouth. Dress and shift burst away from her body like a pricked bubble. A hand stroked her head. You were supposed to keep me informed, Shiriam. That girl is up to something, and I want to know what. It took a long time to convince her questioner that she had already told all she knew, that she would never hold back a word, not a whisper. When she was left alone at last, it was to lie curled up and whimpering from her welts. bitterly wishing that she had never in her life spoken to a single sister in the hall.
The only other thing I'll say is it definitely wasn't a female channeler, because she would have sensed the ability in that person ducking into the tent.
Or someone who shielded themselves or masked themselves. But it would have to be a Forsaken. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Agreed. Yeah, that confirms it.
There's just so many reasons why that's Halima. Just the only doubt in my mind is just, why does she need the information? Doesn't she already know it? And it's like, well, no, she was busy.
Yeah, she's a dumbass and she was busy. So, yeah.
Or maybe the fact, alternate theory on the maids. Halima's trying to figure out what's going on, and so she took them aside to question them. And the question and murder of the maids is why they're dead. Not to hide anything, but because she notices that Egwene is doing something, can't figure out what, and goes to the spies to ask them, what have you seen? Kills them.
Because if she's asking questions, that makes it suspicious. She has to kill them because she talked to them.
Right. Or maybe she tortured them to death to try and make sure that they
right
told the truth. And Super Skylake, we are pretty sure that Arengar sucks at compulsion.
Like, completely.
Completely. Just does not do compulsion, which makes that not an option for compelling. Much more likely to torture and kill.
Yeah, no, I actually like that better than the maids know something, I have to keep it under wraps, but the maids know something, I have to get it out of them. Oopsie, now they're dead. And then she goes to Shiriam, like, I know something is going on. The maids didn't know, but maybe you do, because somebody knows. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I mean, also getting rid of the maids helps her with staying close to Egwene. But why doesn't she kill Chesa? Because Chesa doesn't potentially know anything. I guess, why doesn't she kill Chesa if we're right about this? This theory doesn't protect Chesa. So why does Chesa not get killed?
Only if Chase is a spy for Shiriam.
Which, as far as Halima knows, is the case.
Could be, yeah.
Yeah. Intrigue all the way down.
Right. Yeah. So, and assuming the headaches and the dream stuff with Egwene is because Halima/Arengar is terrible at compulsion and can't just compel her to do what she wants.
Yeah. Or maybe she just thinks Chase is too vapid to understand anything. But Meri and Selame were dumber. Like, demonstrably dumber.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But they were spies. So, anyway, I just had the thought while you're doing it that, like, maybe she's questioning because she already questioned two people and it didn't go well.
I could see that. Well, good chapter. We squeezed another 2 hours out of it. So, we did good. Record. Yep. That's some content.
And that was a loose chapter. There's a lot of dead space, a lot of research, a lot of, like, us looking at stuff in that one. So that should condense down. But
yeah, you said it was going to be really long, but it's going to actually be pretty average.
Yeah, especially for the amount of stuff that we did. But, you know, when I say long, I mean, like, we're not going to go into this and be like, oh, this is just a surface meeting. There's a lot going on behind the scenes.
To go into a favorite rant, like, you have to publish negative results. Otherwise, people will keep doing the same stupid shit over and over again because they don't know that doesn't work because you didn't publish your results saying empirically, no, this doesn't work. You have to reward research for research's sake, not for its profitability.
A negative result is still a result.
Yes! I report rain every single morning. I'm part of an observer network, and Brandon and I will joke about how we didn't get the data we deserved, and there's no data to report on a day with 0. You know, the weather report says we're going to get rain, and it's like, oh, we only got 0.2 of an inch. Like, bummer, I wanted more data. But like, that's a joke, because really every day that we report matters equally. It doesn't matter how much rain we get. Like, zeros, the network tells us over and over again, daily zeros are super critical. Knowing where it didn't rain is vital to understanding where it rains. And this applies to every kind of science, including political science.
You can do a lot more analysis on your data table if it's got zeros in it than not a numbers or unknowns or empty spaces.
Null values are not data.
Null values aren't data. A 0 is.
So it's when you have for-profit research, you end up only publishing the results that make profit, which means that people waste research money and time and effort on replicating results that aren't going to work. It's very frustrating.
Of course, now you're going to get me off on my rant about replicating results and the fact that we don't do that nearly enough. Yeah. And we take, especially in psychology, where we do not replicate results. But there's a lot of other places where, you know, the replication problem in science, like so many studies have been p-hacked to mean something, whereas if you actually went through the process and tried to replicate them, you would get 0 results over and over and over again. There's a lot of single studies that have said, look, we have an effect. And that effect is entirely an illusion of statistics.
Yeah. And like you said, it's way worse in psychology because there's so much bias in how the science even gets done and how the data gets collected. But yeah, it's one of those things that I was shocked when I first read it, that like the replicability problem in science is like massively pervasive.
And that goes back to the same profit motive, right? Because like there's no motivation to report a negative result, and there's no motivation to repeat something that's already been done. Even if you're going to get a different result.
Especially if you're going to get a different result.
Yeah. Because a lot of times they're like, oh no, we're depending on this we're depending on this drug to have an effect. We don't want you to prove the drug has no effect, and we p-hacked our way to an effect. And it's just a placebo. Yeah.
And like, obviously this is not universal, but it's far more common than we should be comfortable with.
It's universal. I would argue with you on that. I would argue that it is entirely universal among the sciences.
Well, I just mean some drugs do actually come into existence. Like,
oh, sure. Right. I guess obviously not every study is faked.
Right. Some things are replicatable. Some studies do actually lead good places.
But there is no wing of science that isn't affected.
Absolutely. Yeah.
By the replicate. Yeah. There's not, no, even, I mean, probably like maybe astronomy might be one of the few places where like you're actually just collecting photons, and it's very hard to to fake that. But
yeah, I definitely think, a lot of physical science, it'll be less terrible in the hard physical sciences. And then as you get into squishier sciences, as you get into medicine, as you get into social science and psychology and everything to do with civics and crime. And I mean, it gets absolutely ridiculous. So you get farther into just hard science of like, what is this rock made of? Does this medicine cause heart attacks? Certain questions, certain branches are less susceptible to this problem. None of them are pure. And we live in a world that way too much does not question this. Like way too much.
The further you get into statistics and away from real math, the more likely you are to have some problems like that.
Yeah, the problem is statistics, really.
Lies, damn lies, and statistics.
They are actually where the devil in the details is lurking. That is the culture and the medium in which that happens.
And we don't teach statistics the way we need to scientists. So many scientists are doing statistics without any understanding of what they're doing.
Well, and I don't even know that it's a teaching problem, because I went through the bare minimum of statistics and I can recognize these problems. Like, I went through the bare minimum. I barely understood what was happening, and I don't have to apply it professionally, and I can spot these problems. So I don't think the teaching was the problem.
No, but you should, if you are doing some heavy statistics, or especially if you're doing a multivariate comparison, you should have a statistician working on your paper.
Oh my God. And more people who don't do science need to understand the basic language of statistics. what a p-value is, what a ridiculous p-value is, that p-hacking is a thing. We should be able to talk about this as a body politic, not just scientists.
My argument is that statistics is wholly unintuitive. And that, while, yes, I want more people to have a basic understanding of it, it's almost impossible to get an intuitive understanding of statistics. You have to really delve into it. And that's where I think you need specialists.
That's fair, but it would just be nice if people didn't brutalize basic terms to pull complete nonsense over their fellow citizens. Like that.
You're not wrong.
But yes, statistics are not intuitive. I absolutely would have failed statistics if I didn't have a mathematician going through the classes with me and helping with all my homework. They're very unintuitive.
Yeah, they're very, and like edge cases are weird. And I mean, there's so many situations where someone in statistics can say, what would you do here? And I'd be like, oh, you should totally go with A. That would be the better. Then they're like, nope, it's B, because your intuition is all wrong. It happens to me constantly.
Yeah, it's not taught well either. I don't think that there's an easy way to teach it, but I know that I did not get given the best possible shot at learning it.
There may not be good ways to teach it, but there are certainly bad ways to teach it.
Yeah, not the greatest set of classes that I took in my degree at all.
Statistics is probably the only time in my life where I've actually turned to my father and said, Dad, I don't understand this math. Can you teach it to me? The man is a terrible mathematician, but he understands statistics. Whereas I'm a great mathematician and statistics doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever.
Right.
It's funny the way his brain works.
Yeah. Brandon managed to get through it and is a mathematician, but it doesn't make him happy. It doesn't push the happy sequence of buttons in his math brain at all.
I watch a lot of YouTube videos about statistics because they're just like, it's a very easy way for someone to be like, hey, you know this thing you think? You're wrong. And then it gets me clickbaity. Yeah. Now, you never saw Myst, or you never played the game Myst, right?
I played it a little bit, yeah.
A little bit. Do you remember the whole concept of the original games is you're going through the different worlds, bringing back red and blue pages and for the brothers, and they're giving you these messages. And they're both telling you the exact same message, but one's like screaming it at you and the other one's being like calm and manipulative. And like, but it's the exact same thing coming at you from both directions. That, to me, is Romanda.
Yes.
It's like you've got these two different voices. They're saying the same thing, just in a very different way. One's red, one's blue, which is also, let's talk about politics. Like, there's this separation between the two of them and the pages. So, yeah, just this idea that you have these two, both of them are giving you toxic messages, but they're giving it in a different style and from two different directions. But you really... And if you don't remember the game, the whole point of the game is you need to ignore their final message when they tell you, don't do X, Y, and Z. It's super dangerous. That's how you win the game, by ignoring them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a good study in how messaging can tilt you one way or another, which, speaking of American politics, it's good to have that perspective. Good to have that little voice in the back just checking for if it's a red page or a blue page.
Yep.
So to speak, and also literally. And
then the fact that when they're telling you, hey, I want you to go against him and you need to go against her, like there's this back and forth, and it's only when they both tell you to do the same thing that you go, oh, that's the wrong thing to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And Swan and Lelaine utilize that masterfully. These two, Romaine uses it not masterfully because they aren't actually working together. Myst, how many games are in the Myst sequence and they keep following that? Like, yeah, it's a very effective way to create intrigue.
And I think they only use that as in the first game, actually.
Oh, no, they definitely used it in the game I played, which was not the first one. I think I played the third one. My dad and I played through the third one, and it was still that. Like, the plot had changed a bit. Like, now one of the brothers is locked up, and the other one wants to get him out. But it was still delivered in the same way, where you would get a piece of information in two different ways and have to, like, find the truth between the two of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, certainly the brothers are basically destroyed at the end of the first book. So I guess at the end of the first game.
Well, I think the second game is
back
or something. I didn't understand the lore when we played the game.
It ends up being yeah. Essentially, the rest of the games are about the two brothers have a father,
right,
and a grandfather, And the rest of the game is them
yeah.
fighting each other. The father and... Yeah, it's the father and the grandfather rather than the two brothers.
Okay, yeah. My dad played the first two, and then he wanted to play the third one, like, with me. So we would, like, it was a thing we did for a couple of years, was, like, sit down and, like, play Myst together. But I never understood the lore or the backstory. I just understood the creepy music and the really pretty puzzles.
Oh, I don't want to get into just how much of the lore. Like, I've played all 4 games many, many times. I've read the 3 books, which are excellent, by the way. There are 3 background books telling the father has a whole backstory, like him growing up and how he learns how to write the books and how his father teaches him, but his father's evil. And there's they go and meet his love and try and save the world. It's this whole backstory that happens before the game of Myst. And then another one goes even further back to the grandfather's childhood and how he first learned. And then and the destruction of... There's this whole civilization of people who wrote books, and they were destroyed, and basically the grandfather killed them all and eliminated the civilization, and he's the only one left with the power. But he's evil, but then he passed it on to his son, who was good. And then it's one of those, like, evil skips a generation. So the grandfather and the sons are evil, but the father isn't.
Gotcha. Yeah, I remember bits of that make sense from what I remember playing the third game. But yeah, with, as a 10-year-old or whatever, I'm just like... no. And my dad didn't care that much about the lore. He just liked the really cool graphics. That was where he was at. He just wanted to look at he wanted to get stoned and look at the pretty colors and have me do the clicking.
I mean, and honestly, that's why Myst really was the trifecta. It had good lore, good graphics, and good puzzles. And that's why it became so popular. It hit all 3 out of the park.
The music always gave me the creeps, though. I wonder if I would find it as creepy now as an adult as I did when I was a kid.
Sometimes I still load up Myst and just go hang out on the island of Myst because I find it calming.
No, it checks out.
It's quiet. There's nobody there. It's very... And you explore... The puzzles force you to explore the 3D world in a way that no other game really has for me. Most of the games, I'm passing through the 3D world. With Myst, I very much feel like I know every nook and cranny of it.
Yeah. I have a game like that.
And it did that amazingly without having 3D models.
Right, yeah.
I guess background, how you been doing? Anything interesting happened over the last week? Catching up, all that stuff while we start talking?
No. I'm just attempting to keep the house clean. We went and enjoyed the coast. Super Bowl Sunday was a really good day to go grocery shopping, to go walk on the beach. That was a wonderfully absent. And normally Sunday afternoons, it's just full of people getting out of church and going shopping, and it's just terrible. But yeah, Super Bowl Sunday, great day to go to the beach. Great day to do errands. That was awesome. So yeah, not really much is happening. Just good food and chill times. Yeah, I feel like we're doing a lot of creative work, so that's good feeling.
Creative how?
Well, like with the audiobook stuff we're doing, actually trying to do Broken Earth kind of more frequently. Like it's just, there's different creative gears turning, and that's been nice. That's about it. What about you?
Had a job interview. We'll see how it goes. I talked about that a little bit before recording, but I'll update folks. It's interesting. The shift for this job, it's 3 12-hour shifts and then 4 12-hour shifts. So it's every other week you work an extra day. But that means you only work either 3 or 4 days a week.
Yeah.
Every other week.
I can see the appeal there.
Especially with a commute. And that would allow me to keep, that would mean that probably either have Thursday or Tuesday off still to record on. But it would be, I'd be back to working full time outside the podcast.
Well, that would be different.
That would be different. I would have a bit of an adjustment. We'd see how that goes. But right now, I think it would mean I would have to get rid of some of the extra projects we've been working on. Probably would drop most of the audiobook work. Probably wouldn't be able to edit Tarvalin After Dark anymore. I'd have to turn that back over to Brian. Just a few things like that. But it certainly shouldn't prevent us from doing a once a week podcast. It might prevent us from going back to 2 a week. So.
Yeah, well, maybe I can do Tarvalin After Dark.
Yeah, pass that on to you. That'd be great.
A little in-house transition.
Yeah, that'd be fine. Fox and Raven Media, editing.
I mean, why the hell not? I learned these skills for this reason. Like, it wouldn't be that hard.
Yeah, I thought about that and meant to mention it to you, but we'll see.
Well, I hope that this job thing works out for you in whatever capacity it can.
Same. Same. Yeah, no, because I think we talked about this, but if it worked out, then I'd probably be transferring most of the patron money to Aradia to do most of the work. And that combined, if you took up Tar Valon After Dark, it would actually probably end up being a decent amount of income.
It would certainly make my ordinary breadwinner very happy. If I could contribute a little more than I do.
Always nice. Yeah. Yeah. And I'd still be here for recordings, but that would be pretty much it.
Mm-hmm. No, creative output is really good to balance. That's more like analytical engineering stuff. It would be part of your like self-care to maintain the output of actually recording the podcast.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I need this. This is as much therapy for me as it is anything else.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. It's important. It's important. But there's a lot of reading I want to do in this chapter. This chapter has a lot of readable moments.
It does. Yeah. I have a lot to say about this chapter. It's almost, I'm hesitating to jump into it because there is so much going on in the background. I'm not sure how to approach it. Not that I'm not sure how to approach it, but I want to approach it in the right way and like make sure we actually nail some of this stuff because I think there's a lot to say. It's Peak's log, right? It's Peak's log. It is a lot of names, a lot of backgrounds, a lot of subtle things that if you don't care and don't know who these people are, it can be really boring to read. But this is where we shine. Mm-hmm. And this is going to be a long ass episode. So sit back and enjoy. And Aradia, would you read us in?
Yes, quite happily.
Thank you for listening to the Wheel of Time Spoilers podcast. Rate us in the Apple Podcast app or support us on Patreon. Is that good enough?